What's going on, guys? My name is Bruce. Welcome back to my channel, and the effects I'm going to break down for you today is now, to recreate this effect, you're going to need two things: After Effects and a plugin from Video Copilot, Element 3D. Now, I'll assume you have the basic understanding of After Effects and how the Element 3D plugin works. If you don't, then there's tons of videos online you can go and watch just to get you up to speed. Now, usually I plan everything on my iPhone, and this will be the part where I bring my iPhone up on the screen to show you how I planned it. However, as this effect is predominantly 3D, it requires little to no planning when you shoot it, other than a basic storyline so you know what part goes where. This effect is very similar to the iPhone throw transition I made a few weeks ago. I'll link that down in the description so you can go and check that one out. But anyway, enough of me talking, let's just jump straight into After Effects and I'll show you how I made this transition. Okay then, guys, so welcome to After Effects. This is the effect I'm going to break down for you today. Now, I think the easiest way to show you this would be to split this into a horizontal view. I'm going to make this one a custom view, and this here on the left is the active camera. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just drop down the quality and turn off motion blur. So this is the active camera, and this is the scene. And what you can do is you can move around the scene using this toggle between the C key, and you can move around the scene using these different options. Now, if you know how to use Element 3D, and I'm assuming you do if you're watching this video, then I mean, this is probably all you need to know, because this basically, from this, you can sort of understand how it works. So if I just click the camera a second, and you see this is the path of the camera, this line here, and as I scrub through the timeline, you see the camera starts by pointing down, it's moving along, it's looking up. So this is the way the camera's pointing at the moment, is up towards the billboard. And as I come round, and then here, you can see here now, it's starting to look at the billboard. And then as it gets closer, it just lines itself up with the billboard. And then here, it stops. So then it stops there. And if I just zoom in a second, this is now basically like this is just looking at a TV screen, because this is now the clip playing. So that's the rest of the clip playing. But from this perspective, it looks as though it's gone through or into the billboard, but it hasn't. All it's done really is it's just stopped there. And now it's like looking at a TV screen. So, yeah, if you know how to use Element 3D, this is probably all you need to know. But I'm going to break it down for you anyway, as what each layer does. So I'm just going to switch back to one view, and I'll turn off these layers, and we'll start from the first one, which is the element layer. So this element is just a solid. So I'd right click, new, click solid. I'd rename that to Element 3D. I'd come to Effects, Video Copilot Element, and then it just gives me the scene setup. All right, so that's all this layer is really. So if I go into that scene setup, so if I come into here and click scene setup now, I'm not going to give you a breakdown of all of this because this is not going to concern this video. This is actually a separate pack you can buy, which is the Metropolitan pack, which gives you all of these buildings that you can buy as a whole pack and use them in your scene. But I'm not going to cover that today because that's not important to this video. But if you want like a full breakdown of like a city fly through or how I created the whole scene, then leave me a comment down below and I can, you know, consider making a video about that. This object though is something you get with Element 3D. It's actually here in the starter pack, so billboard. So if I click that, it's slightly bigger because this is an unscaled version because I scaled mine down, but this is just the main object really, and this is going to be the source of our transition. So the layer we need to concern ourselves with is this one here, which is billboard. And the way the billboard is, it's a 3D object, but the way the billboard is constructed really is it's in three separate parts. So it's broken down: billboard, poster 2 and poster 1. So billboard is this one. So I switch it off, you can see all the metal framework disappear. And then poster 2 is on this side. So this is poster 2, which is that one. Turn it on and off, you can see. And then this side is poster 1. So as you can see, on and off disappears. So you can add any picture you want or video into here that you desire. So this makes it really powerful to use as a transition, because you can come out of this one and then you can spin around and go into this one, or come out of this one. And that's not just limited to the billboard. You could use any object. So this is really powerful because it gives you options of combining, real footage into 3D scenes and making it look like a seamless transition. And it just gives that sort of surreal effect, which works really well. So the way I got this religion logo onto this object is on the object itself. You have this option, this layer diffuse, and this is basically just the main color. I'm not going to go through all of these other maps. You can add like bump maps and stuff like that, but the main one is just diffuse. So on the diffuse, if you click it, you can actually come into here and click load from file, and I can just select any picture I want, and then now that picture is now in the billboard, and I can use that as basically it's like the texture for that object. But obviously, like I said, you're not limited to just using a still picture. You can use a video, but one step further than that is you can actually load in a picture or a video that's in your composition already, which is one of these here. And what I've used the religion logo, which is already in my composition. I'll show you how to get it into your composition in a moment, but what you need to concern yourself with is the fact that I've used this one here, so the religion logo, which is just a still picture for this side, and then this side, which is this one, so now we're on this one, is a video, again, that's loaded in from the composition, which just happens to be Tash. You won't see it because I'm not on the right frame at the moment, and I'll explain that in a moment. But yeah, so this is the Tash video. Okay, so now we have a still picture here, which is the religion logo, and a video which is going in here. Right, so that's the object. The actual scene itself is made up of, like I said, the Metropolitan pack, but regardless of that, to actually get a background in and get lighting and things like that, you want to add an environment, and the way you would do that is you'll come up to here and click your environment, and this one here is again very similar. You can load one in from the composition, or you can go click that arrow, go load from file, and you can actually load in your own from your Windows Explorer. And with the Metropolitan pack, you actually get Metropolitan skies, so you can add in one of these as well. This doesn't come standard with Video Copilot, but you don't have to use these. You could just go online and find an HDRI or any panoramic picture you want, really. And the one I've used is this one, so I've clicked that. I've clicked open, and then what it's done is it's used this as the environment, and I hit OK. So with this now down here, this environment button, you can switch it on and off, but this doesn't do anything apart from just the viewport in our 3D scene. That's all it's doing, is just showing you the environment in the 3D scene. But what it's doing is this object is now using the reflections from this scene. So if, say for instance, there's buildings in here, it's going to use the lights and the reflections from this onto the objects. Like here, for instance, you can see these buildings have glass, so these objects have reflectivity. If I change this background to say something, let's just use a basic one, for instance. So these are the ones that come with your Element 3D. I think this is the standard one you get. If I change it to that, you can see now it's using the lighting from this one instead. And this is the environment that we're using. But obviously we don't want to use that because that's not going to be very realistic to this scene. So let's hop out of that. Now this is the foundation of the effect, but it's also where the bulk of the effect happens, really. So the Element 3D layer is the scene that you're going to be navigating around using the camera. So you need to add a camera in, which is this one here. And the camera's just got a few simple keyframes of position, really, that moves around the scene. So if I just turn that layer on quickly, you can see now we're moving around this scene. And the way that I animated this camera is I just use the C on the keyboard. So if you click the, let me go to a different frames, let's go to here. If you hit the C on the keyboard, you can toggle between these few different options. So this one's the zoom, so let's just zoom out a second so you can see this a bit better. So this is the Element 3D scene I've just made. And then if you use this one, you can pan around. So this is a one node camera, so it's panning around on the actual spot, so it's not particularly great. And then this one is the move, so you can move around. So nothing too fancy really with it. And what I've done is I've added some keyframes, and on the last one you can see the camera just stops dead still as if it's going into the billboard. I'll just delete those ones quickly. So with this effect, I've got the religion logo in here, and I've also got the Tash video on here, and it's pulling these from these two layers above, this one and this one. Okay, so like I said a moment ago, to get this actually in there, I need to first load it into the scene. And the way you do that is you go to your element layer, come to your custom layers, and then custom texture maps, and then you have an option here for layer 1, layer 2, and you can have up to 10, I think. And you can see layer 1, religion logo, source, and current time. So what that means is it's using this layer here, which is this one here. It's using the source, so it's not using any effects on that layer, it's just using the source. And it's also using the current time, which means that it's using the time that the playhead's at in the composition when you view it through the window. I've also got layer 2, which is Tash, which is this one here. Again, current time, but it's got effects and masks this time because there's some effects on this layer which I'll go through in a moment, which I wanted it to take into account. If I use source, then it wouldn't use the effects on that layer. Okay, so then once they're loaded in, that's when you can then come into here, click this, and then you can choose them from here like that. Okay, so now I've discussed that. This one here is switched off, and if I switch it on, it will cover the whole screen, so it needs to be off really. It doesn't have to be on. So if I switch it off, you can see it's stuck it in there because I've loaded it in through the element. The Tash layer again is also switched off, but the Tash layer is a video of Tash, which is this one here. So that's this one. Now this is a composition, so if I double click it, this is the video of Tash, but you'll notice that this is a freeze frame, that's why I've put FF, and then this one here is the video. So it gets to here, and then it plays, and then there's a speed ramp. I mean, that's not essential to this effect, but what you need to know is this here is a freeze frame. And if I stop there and then come into this, you'll notice that is where the transition takes place, there to there. I'm just going to switch on this light so it's a bit brighter. So there to there is where the transition takes place, but that is also where the freeze frame finishes. And the reason I had a freeze frame is because when I'm playing it through here, I wanted this to be still, but because I was moving the camera around, there was some joltiness, and I didn't like that. So I wanted this to be still, and then it gets to here, as if it's just a still picture, it gets to here, and then that's when it transitions into the billboard, which is when the freeze frame finishes. So that's why it's in a composition, because I needed it to be in one whole layer to use as a custom layer for element. The effects I've used on this layer, which is why I've selected effects and masks in the custom layers, which here I've used effects and masks. The effects I've used, is a transform, which is just I've flipped it. Personal preference, don't have to. I just chose to. That's always on, so you can have it that way if I want, or can have it that way. It doesn't matter. And there's also a Lumetri. So if I double click that, there are some keyframes on here, and you'll notice it's black and white, and then it goes to color. I don't have to have done that. I could just have that off and have it in color the whole time. It doesn't really matter. The reason there's keyframes is because it goes from color. Sorry, it goes from black and white, and then it goes to color like that. There's also an exposure keyframe. It was a bit dark, so I've added an exposure keyframe in there as well. So it goes from 0 and it just bumps it up a little bit to 4. A little bit dark, so I brightened up a little bit. And that's why there's those on there. The next one up from that is the glass breaking. The glass breaking itself is just some green screen footage of some glass breaking. Let me just play this back, and you can see if I actually turn off the background, well, you can hardly see it, but it's been keyed out already, and this is just what I've overlaid. I mean, it's not realistic because you wouldn't really be smashing through glass when you go through a billboard. So if I switch it on, I've cut it here so it starts there. So as that goes to color, you can see the glass has started to smash there, and then it carries on to there. Yeah, and that's that layer really. I mean, it's not something you have to add, it's just something I chose to do at the time. Okay, so moving on up from that then, I've also added some fire. Again, personal preference, not important to this as a transition, but I just wanted to add some fire on the top. Like this is just, again, some keyed out footage, which is just some fire that's playing. And the way I actually got it stuck to the billboard is quite an interesting way, actually. What you do is, let's just find the part we want it to get it stuck to. So let's just say that's where we want it. This is, because this is a 3D scene, this is 3D space. Okay, so you need to get a 3D position of where this billboard is. And the way you do it is if you come to your element layer and then come to utilities, you have this generate 3D position. If you click this little target, you can choose a position. And then if you click that, you then click generate 3D null. And then now there's a null, which is like a placeholder really, saying element position 1. And that will stick to that billboard, because that's now the position of that. That's now that 3D position in 3D space. So then all you do is you take your object, which happens to be the fire. If you hit P on that and P on that, you can copy by hitting Control and C that position to that position. So what you do is you copy the position of the null to the fire, and then you make the fire 3D. And then what that does is it then basically just sticks the fire in the position of that null. And because it's 3D, it knows it's in 3D space as well. So make it 3D first, then copy the position to it. And then it's going to be in the position of that null. Or you also want to make sure that you make the layer with motion blur as well. Because if you don't add motion blur, what's going to happen is if when you get to, let's just say when you get to a part where there's motion blur on it. So here, there, you've got motion blur on the whole scene. If you don't have motion blur on the fire, then it's just going to be like that. So you need to make sure you add motion blur to that as well. The next layer up from that is some particles that I've added in. I'll just turn those on. And these, again, is just personal preference. Might not be important to you. But these here are just a composition with some particles that have been keyed out. And there's 3 of them because they were a bit dark. So I just duplicated it once and then duplicate it again. Brightens it up, and they're keyed out so I can show you, but you're probably not really seeing much there. You can just about see them, and they're going to be overlaid. I just felt like it gave a nice effect, or at least I felt like it gave it a nice effect at the time. The one other thing that you'll want to do is you want to add a background. So what I'll do very quickly is I'll just turn off the group of the Metropolitan pack. So let's just focus on this for now. So if you're just going to be using the billboard, then you're still going to want a background in there. And the way to add a background really, really easily is you're going to want a background that you're using for the reflections or the lighting, if you're using this for your lighting as well. And the way you do it is if you come to your render settings, there's a physical environment section, and there's an option here, show in background. And this one here is basically this here, this environment. So what you're doing by this is you're ticking that, and it's just using this background as the background that you're using in the environment as the background for the layer. So if I turn that off, it disappears, and then back on, you can see now you've got the background in there again. Just the last thing really is you want to add some motion blur to the element 3D as well. Make sure you tick that on so it adds motion blur, else it's not going to add the motion blur to the layer when you spin around it, and you want that because it makes it look more realistic. So there you can see on and off, just gives it that extra bit of dramatic effect, if you want to call it that. So then when you put it all together and you play it back, now I am going to actually do a video on how I created this whole scene. So how I got these buildings in here and whatnot, how I created the whole scene. I'm going to do a video on this part here of the composition, which is where the camera comes down, flies down towards me, and I'm just pointing towards the left. But this technique here is very similar to what I've just shown you, where I've created a 3D position and then attached myself to that position, and the same with the fire. But instead of on a billboard, I've done it on a building, and I just happen to be keyed out in front of some green screen. and it's just some really good timing, really. But what I'll do is I'll do a video on this in a few weeks' time anyway. But let me know if you'd like me to do a breakdown of like a city fly through, because I get asked it quite a lot, and I'll be more than happy to make that. But yeah, guys, that's the whole effect. I hope you enjoyed that. This effect is being used in a video I made about a year ago. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can go and watch that video now. It's only a minute long. I'll also leave a link in the description below with the footage that I used for this transition. I'm also breaking down other effects from that video, so make sure you check back or subscribe to see every time I post a new one. But thanks anyway, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.